Okay, now that we have the layout of the rectangles, we're going to do white to black. Okay? So let's first get the white paint and the black paint on the lid. So I'm going to do 5 scoops of white, good size scoops, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And even if you end up putting more than what we need, it's not a big deal because we're going to be using the white for the second rectangle that goes white to hue. Okay? And now I'm going to grab about 2 scoops, maybe actually I'm going to do 3 scoops of black. Okay, so make sure that you rinse out your paintbrush with water and then you wipe it before you put it back into the container. That way you keep the black solid black with no white in it. So there's 1 scoop, 2, I'm going to do 1 more. And be careful not to drip any of the black in the other paint. Okay. All right, I'm gonna move my container away so that I only have the lid. So we have white and we have black. We're gonna have solid white here, and it's gonna go straight to solid black, but we need to do the gradual change or gradation of solid white to solid black gradually. So let's go ahead and start with the white first. You always want to start with the lightest paint whenever you're mixing or blending or attempting a gradation or shading for that matter, because that's what a gradation is, you're shading. So solid white, rinse out my paintbrush. I like to wipe my paintbrush on my hand and not just on the paper towel, because when I wipe it on my hand, I can tell how wet it is, if it has too much water, right? You don't need to mix water with your paint, with the tempera paint, that is. All right, so get a good scoop of white. Go ahead and put it on here. You might be wondering, why am I painting this white, the paper white, if it's already white? Well, when it comes to blending with paint, in order for you to blend properly, the paint needs to be wet. Okay? Once this paint dries, you can't just be like, oh, I'm gonna add some water to activate or make the paint wet. That's not how it works. It works like that with watercolors, but not with tempera and not with acrylic paint. Okay. All right, so I put it halfway across because we're then going to come in with a light gray and mix it in with the white that's already here. If you do want to put a little bit of water into your paint, you can, but you don't need to. And that's just to keep the paint kind of wet. All right, so now I'm going to rinse out my paintbrush and I'll make a light gray on my palette here, or on my lid. And keep in mind, you're kind of working against time when you're painting because you don't want the paint to dry. All right, and remember, tempera paint dries a little lighter than how you see it. So I'm going to make it, this is a good one, nice little light gray. I'm going to put directly on top of the white that I put on. Right, and now I'm going to just drag it towards the left. And notice that the gray that I put down starting here is actually getting lighter as I'm going to the left. And that's because it's also blending in with the white that's on there. And so I'm going to stop about here. Notice also that I'm rotating my paintbrush when I am painting, just so that I get all the paint that's on my paintbrush onto the paper. All right. And so we have solid white, light white, and starting on medium white. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to get rid of these lines that show up. This one, okay? Rinse out my paintbrush so it doesn't have any paint on it. Dry it out with the paper towel. Put it on my hand. Make sure it's not wet. And just kind of dry, a little damp. And all I'm going to do is almost act like you have a feather in your hand. And you're just dabbing it on top of that line that showed up. Wipe it so that there's no extra paint. All I'm doing is using the paint that's already on my paper and feathering it so it just fades out. You see how that line just faded out? I'm going to do the same thing over here. But this could only be done when the paint is still wet. Once the paint dries, you can't do this. And so now that line disappeared as well here. Okay. All right, see that? I can do that here as well, slightly. I'm going to make more of this gray because we're going to need more of it. So I'm going to put a little bit more white in there so I have more paint, and then grab some more black and then mix it. Okay. If you notice, my hand's already getting kind of dirty, but that's okay. I like using my hand when painting and wiping my paintbrush on there. All right, so I'm just taking a little darker gray and going over towards the right. I need to make more, it wasn't enough. Mixing it, and that might end up drying out before I can get to it, and that's okay. I'll show you how to fix it if it does end up drying on you before you can blend it. Whoops, I went outside the line a little bit. Don't be too concerned about staying inside the line as much as you should be concerned with trying to blend the gradual changes from light to dark. Okay. All right, so I'm going to blend that out. Rinse out my paintbrush. And remember, don't be too harsh on yourself if it doesn't come out the way mine is coming out. For a lot of you, this is going to be the very first time you're attempting to blend with paint. And so keep in mind, this is not the first time I've done this, or I'm doing this. I've done this multiple times, so I've had plenty of practice. The goal is, as we do more and more of these, the goal is that you get more comfortable with the blending and using the paint properly. Okay, so now you see, every time you see me take the paintbrush out of view, it's because I'm wiping it on my hand to get any extra paint that's there. Okay, and then I'm just going along, and now making another. So I still have this medium gray there, and I'm gonna go ahead and mix more. I'm gonna make a darker gray. So now I have access to that darker gray. And notice how I'm mixing it away from this one, just in case I need it. I'll have it there. And then I can start putting it here, right? Because we're gradually getting darker and darker. And looks like the medium gray already dried up, but it's okay because I still have it right here. Now you won't be able to mix or blend or mix the exact same paint twice or the same value twice. You can get pretty close to it, which is fine, and then you just blend it, all right? But just remember that. All right, now I want to blend that line out. Rinse out my paintbrush. So whenever you want to blend something or fade something out, a line, you have to rinse out your paintbrush, wipe it on paper towel or your hand, right? And remember, you're just using the paintbrush almost like a feather. And you're just kind of lightly dabbing. I'm barely applying any pressure with my paintbrush. I'm almost just like dragging it across that line so that it fades out. And then I'm going to wipe my paintbrush again so that it doesn't have any paint on there. And I'm just going to continue that until I get the blending effect that I want. If you drag your paintbrush over that line too much, you will start to take away some of the paint that's actually there that you actually need, right? So be mindful of that when you are trying to fade out a line. If you notice that you're taking away paint that should actually be there because you're applying too much pressure, okay? And remember also that the paint just dries a little lighter. All right, so now we can go, now I'm gonna make some more of this darker gray. So I have it when I mix it in or blend it in with the solid black in a minute. So this is gonna go straight to solid black right here, and then I'm gonna fade it in. So I'm gonna make it again as close as I can get it to. I'm just gonna test it by just putting a little bit there. That looks pretty close. Maybe just a little bit more black. There we go. Rinse my paintbrush out, and then I'm just gonna grab solid black and put it directly onto this section here. If your paint is coming out watery or you can see through the paint, that means you're not drying out your paintbrush enough and it has water in it. Okay, so just make it a habit of rinsing your paintbrush and wiping it with the paper towel or your hand. I tend to do both. All right, so now I have that line there and I'm gonna get rid of it. So rinse out my paintbrush, wipe it, and now fade out that line. Remember the darker gray is still wet, so I'm able to do it. If it wasn't wet or if it was dry already, you would just see streaks of black. Alright. And then when that dries, it'll be a little smoother looking in here. It looks shiny because of the reflection from the light. Say I wanted to fix this up because I'm not happy of how it's not smooth enough there. So what you do, and this is already dry, right? So I can't blend it. I can't just apply water and do it. So what you have to do is mix or make as close to that value as you had before. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm making a light gray. That's close to that. That's pretty close. That's almost spot on. All right, so I'm putting it on there. And right now you see the line. I'm going to go over. So when you're blending two values together, you don't just want to put one here and they're barely touching there. We want to overlap them. When you overlap them, that allows you to blend it better and not have those lines that show up that then we have to fade out. Okay, all right. So that's that light gray, and I'm going to use this medium gray to put over it and fade it into over here. Okay, rinse out my paintbrush, dry it off, wipe it off, take this gray, and just put it directly over that line. And notice how it's already blending. So it's taking that light gray and it's mixing into it, which is allowing us to fade out that line. Wipe my paintbrush. And same thing. And this is what you do every single time when you're trying to fade or blend paint into one another. All right. And so there's the gray one, or the white to solid black.